It's wonderful to see you here in church this MLK weekend. Good to have you here in person. Wonderful to have those joining with us online. Glad that you're with us as well. And for all those in the future who are going to tune in here and listen to the message, we're sure glad that you were able to tune in as well. Well, it's church. It's Sunday. We made it to the weekend. Anyone got some plans for tomorrow that they're going to be heading out of town or whatever it might be? Did anyone head out of town yesterday? Where did you guys head to? We were at the beach. We drove right by you probably. How funny is that? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Anyone else get away this weekend? Oh yeah. Where did you head? Oh, to Seaside. We probably drove right by you as well. We started out at Nesquin and we drove all the way up to Astoria. And then, of course, we had to visit the Goonies house. That was just right. They're more welcoming to visitors, by the way, right now. So it was fun to be able to go down that childhood path. Yeah. If we're new to each other, my name's Brad. I'm one of the pastors here and get the privilege of being able to preach a message this morning, which happens to be the third part of our series that we began at the beginning of the year. If this is the first time that you're tuning in with us, or either online or in person here, that you've come at the perfect time for week 3. But I'll try and catch you up just a little bit. The series is called Love Is, Love Does, and Love Wins. The very first week that we began the series, we talked about really the great instruction of Jesus, which is essentially God's big purpose for us, a huge part of God's calling on our lives, and that is to love God and each other. If we do those things, we really can't go wrong. Some of us get so tied up in what is my calling, what is my purpose in life. Well, let me tell you this morning, start with loving God and loving others, and the rest will follow along. When Jesus was asked in Matthew 22, what is the greatest commandment in the law? He responded by giving a 2-part answer. He said, first and foremost, the greatest commandment can be summarized in this way: love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength, some versions say. And then the second is like this: love your neighbor as yourself. Everything that's ever been taught when it comes to our faith begins and ends with love. And all of the prophets of the Old Testament, everything that they instructed us to do had to do, if it can be boiled down, with love. Great book you might consider reading throughout this series would be the book Love Does by Bob Goff. I know that Kathy mentioned that earlier. Did you mention that earlier this service as well? Perfect. The small groups, we're going through a Bible study with that. You're more than welcome to go on Amazon. I think it's about $10 to buy the book and read through it. It would really help you in some ways, I'm sure, as you read through that. At least you'd be inspired by the stories that Bob tells. Last week was week 2 of the series, and we really talked about what love does. We talked about the fact that God is love, and love is action. If our love is dormant and lifeless, it's a strong indicator as to also the health of our soul. So we're called to action in our love for God and for each other. And although it's a real challenge sometimes to love people well, isn't it? Especially when we're in just a bad season of life or when we're feeling kind of selfish that day. It's tough to love people well from time to time. But it's very easy to see one thing is true about love, and that's this: love is a gift, isn't it? If you've ever been loved well, love is a gift. If you've ever had the opportunity to love somebody with a wholehearted approach, you know that love is a gift. So when it comes to gifts, let me ask you this: have you ever missed the mark? I'll never forget Christmas of 2013 when my mother-in-law bought me a gift. This is the first you're hearing about it here, but I'm sure everything will spring back. You don't know I'm going to tell this story today, Marilyn, but here it is. Everyone knows Marilyn. There she is. She bought me a Christmas gift, and let me tell you, her gifts are always just so thoughtful. She goes above and beyond all the time, especially when it comes to gifts. And so it's Christmas 2013, no exception to this. She bought me a wonderful gift. She ordered it online, and she was excited to give this gift to me. I remember unwrapping it with enthusiasm, and I looked up at her, and she was excited that I was unwrapping it, and I opened it up. And I couldn't quite describe what it is that I saw, except it was a bright fuchsia something. And as I pulled it out, I read the label, and it definitely said women's medium. And I slowly held it up against me, and everyone burst out laughing, as they rightly should have. And she had bought me a bright fuchsia sweater, and I decided, well, I probably should try it on. And I found a photo of me trying it on. You want to see it? You can never unsee this. Fair warning. Here it is. Christmas 2013. Yep, that's there forever now. Well, no one can argue that my mother-in-law was thoughtful. But I think there's a valuable lesson here. Always read, firstly, the description thoroughly before you click the buy button. And secondly, and perhaps even more of a valuable lesson, is that one thing might be right for one person, but isn't right necessarily for another. Personally, I think I pulled it off quite well. But my wife was pretty clear that a women's medium is not my size. It reminds me of a certain marketing claim that some clothing manufacturers use. Have you ever seen this label before? Yeah, you're right to laugh at this, because what a lie this is. I've yet to come across something that legitimately was, because of all of our different shapes and all of our different sizes and all of our different likes and dislikes, no one thing really on this planet is able to satisfy and meet the needs of every single one of us, even the most basic needs in life. For example, water. Water is a basic need in life. I was reading, though, an article earlier this week about a woman who has an allergic reaction every time she gets in contact with water, no matter how pure it is or saline it is. It's no small obstacle in life to be allergic to water. It's unbelievable. You would think that everyone would have the same reaction to it, but even some people are terrified of water. So I thought perhaps air is something that, would satisfy all of us, and that it would be more of a one-size-fits-all. But then I thought, well, probably not the air in Western China or Eastern Pakistan or Northern India, as the air's pretty much at toxic levels. And thinking about it even more, in Oregon, you can't really step outside in the spring without taking a couple Claritin first. So perhaps then, not even air. One size fits all does not seem to work. It always seems to end up looking a little like this, doesn't it? We're all just far too unique. And what a beautiful thing it is for us to have such diversity in this world. So many different backgrounds and cultures and likes and dislikes and shapes and sizes. We're all so unique. One size fits all doesn't seem to work for us, and it's okay. Yet somehow, and have you ever thought of this, even with all of our diversities, even with all of our differences, God somehow manages to allocate equal love and value to each of us. Isn't that something? And Romans 5 makes it real clear by saying this, that when we were utterly helpless, Christ came at just the right time and died for us sinners. Not just some sinners, us sinners, all of us sinners. Now most people would not be willing to die for now most people would not be willing to die for an upright person, although someone might perhaps be willing to die for a person who's especially good. I love how Paul writes. Fantastic. He puts it down to earth, doesn't he? But God showed his great love for us, meaning all of us, not just some of us, by sending Christ to die for us as we were still sinners. Or the psalm The Psalms say in Psalm 86, "O Lord, you are so good, so ready to forgive, so full of unfailing love for all," you can correct me, "for all who ask for your help." So you see, God allocates equal value and love to each and every one of us. His opportunity for salvation is not just for a few. The kingdom of heaven doesn't just await for some, but for all who are open to his word, who say, "Yes, Christ is the Savior. Yes, I believe he died and rose again, and I believe that he has forgiven me my sins and made me right with him." The opportunity is for all. Of course, then you need to be able to say that you've taken that opportunity. God allocates equal value and love to each of us. And so as I was studying this, I came across something interesting, that even though God offers unconditional love to us in equal portions, as in we could never make God love us more or less, his love is already perfect and complete, but God does tend, and you may have noticed this, God does tend to love us differently. It's equal, it's unconditional in his love, but it's not always the same from one person to the next. And sometimes it's not the same from one season or one circumstance to another in our own life. In other words, God's love doesn't always look the same. And here are some scriptures that show this. I'm going to underline some of the different ways that God tends to love. And these are just a couple of ways that God tends to love us, but they're different kinds of love for different seasons and for different people. And I'm going to read these 4 scriptures, and I've underlined how it is that God's love varies. And so the first here is Proverbs 3. "My child, don't reject the Lord's discipline." This is maybe not the best one to begin with, but I wanted to make it clear it's really different. "And don't be upset when he corrects you." And there's just a corporate groan right here as we read this one, right? "For the Lord corrects those he loves, just as a father corrects a child in whom he delights." And the next one, Zephaniah, "For the Lord your God is living among you. He is a mighty Savior. He will take delight in you with gladness." This one's better, isn't it? This is a better type of love. "With his love, he will calm all your fears. He will rejoice over you with joyful songs." And then I've got 2 more. Isaiah, "For the mountains may move and the hills disappear, but even then my faithful love for you will remain. My covenant of blessing will never be broken, says the Lord who has mercy on you." And the final one, of course, is this: "But you, O Lord," in the Psalm, "are a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger." Hey, Borges. Hi. "Slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness." To some, God's love looks like discipline. Right? But it's true, isn't it? God's love sometimes does look like that. You may be experiencing that season right now where you just feel like every step of the way is a test or a challenge of some kind, or there's some consequences that you're dealing with, but you know, hey, I just need to keep trusting in God in this season, because God's love sometimes looks like discipline. To others, sometimes it looks like mercy and grace. Sometimes it might look like blessing, and we all get jealous of those people, don't we, where God's love for them looks like blessing all the time. And then to others it looks like peace, and we love that when God loves us in that way. To some, God's love looks like patience. I love it when God is patient with me. To others, it's rejoicing and joyfulness. See, the same love of God, although full and complete in its character, is unique for each and every one of us. Not only that, his love is tailored to each and every season and circumstance that we endure in life. In other words, God's love is not one size fits all. It's just not. God uniquely meets each of us on an individual level, loving us as we need him to in that season. Not necessarily how we want him to, but how we need him to. And sometimes we get so tied up in the way that somebody else is being loved by God that we actually miss the way that God is loving us. Have you ever been there before? I know I have. We wonder why it is that that person is blessed so much. We wonder why it is that person has such an easy life. We wonder why, and we miss the way that God is loving us in the season that we need Him to love us. This happens at my house sometimes. I have 2 kids, and they're contrastingly different. 2 girls. And over the years, I've found that my love for them is the same, but is different, right? For each of them. It's same in its fullness, but the way I show them is a little bit different. My oldest, Vila, is active and she's very responsible, a remarkable trait of the oldest child. I show my love for her when we play together, do active things, and then when I challenge her to do difficult things. She rises to the challenge and she sees me become very proud of her. My youngest, Malachi, is driven by compassion and empathy and humor. And so I show my love for her with a lot of hugs and with an abundance of joking around and laughing together. I see them both and I love them both, but I love them differently. Sometimes my oldest sees and wants cuddles like I have with her younger sister, and she gets jealous and she comes over for some snuggles with Daddy, and I'm all about it. Of course, I snuggle with her as well, but it lasts all of about 4 seconds until she gets bored and wants to go play games. Sometimes my youngest daughter sees the way that I give responsibility and trust to her older sister, and she demands to be treated like a bigger kid. So I oblige. I give her these additional responsibilities as request, and it doesn't take long for her to realize that she hates it. She gets tired and frustrated and wants to go back to the way that things were. And I'm not God, of course, but I think this paints an effective picture of the father-child relationship that we have. If I were to love them both in the same way, either one would feel very loved and the other wouldn't, or neither of them would be very loved at all. Our love cannot be one size fits all. Yet this is often what we default to, not necessarily when it comes to our family members, although sometimes, but a lot of the time, how it is that we love others in the way that God has instructed us to. We often love people in the way that we ourselves want to be loved, and this is a good place to start, but it's not always all that effective. And although this is a great place to start, we generally will find that the relationship will eventually run its course. And like God, we need to love people uniquely as well. And if we don't, our efforts really will be in vain, and our energy will be wasted. And God clues us in on some different kinds of love in the Bible. In the New Testament, which originally was written in Greek, God speaks of really 4 different kinds of love. The Greek words use these 4 words in order to distinguish between the different levels and intensities of love that they were trying to explain and experience. And some of these words appear in the Bible in ways that I'm about to mention, and others are actually variations of these 4 words from the word love in the Greek. Now, this is not to say is the only categorizing of how it is we should love others, but really it's a way that we can see that God has already categorized some ways that we naturally go to love people. And so in this, he's proven that there are different ways that we love. It's not one size fits all. Am I making sense to you this morning? Okay. There are 4 ways that love is explained in a variation or exact of these following 4 types of love. Firstly, in the Greek, is this agape love. And really, what we could say about agape love is that it's everlasting and it's sacrificial. Right? The original Greek translation in the scriptural passage of God is love, this word agape is used here. And it's also this word agape as it's talked in Corinthians, and we mentioned this in the last 2 weeks that we were together. When love is spoken about, as in love is patient and love is kind, it's enduring, it doesn't hold grudges, that kind of love is this kind of love, this agape love, this perfect love that endures and is everlasting and is sacrificial. Agape love is the word that they used. The next is storge love, which is love really within a family. And this word describes a deep, caring bond, and I'm sure you've experienced this in your life, that develops between, it develops naturally between parents and children and husbands and wives and siblings and other close family. And this type of love can withstand all sorts of trials. It's protective and it's loyal. And then, interestingly, Paul warns us about the end times where people will become so selfish that they will live without any sense of any kind of natural affection in this way to even their own family. You can read about that in 2 Timothy. Then there's filio love, and this is brotherly love. The nickname of the city Philadelphia is the city of brotherly love. And this word filio really expresses it expresses the way that God explains a relationship between the warmth and affinity shared by close friends, right? Almost as if those close friends were actually family members. A memorable way to remember filio love is to think of it as storge love, but between friends. The love that bonds a family together is close to that love that bonds friends. Interestingly, the Greek translation from the biblical passage, when it talks about us being devoted to one another in love, it uses this Greek word Philadelphia, instructing us to love our neighbors as our brothers. So, and then there's the final one, which is eros love, which is a romantic love or a sexual love. And the root of the English word, really, erotic, comes from this word. Eros and sexual love is, by the way, not in itself impure. It's not impure, right? It's a gift from God to husband and wife, but in order for them to be able to express themselves to each other, express their love to one another, and continue the human race. As Song of Solomon says, that God intended for married couples to love each other not only emotionally but also physically, and this is the type of love that is used in the Greek, eros love. Notably, by the way, this type of love is the only type of love that, if practiced without restraint, can lead to sin. The Bible warns us that eros love without boundaries amounts to sexual immorality in a lot of cases. You can read about that in 1 Corinthians 6 or Galatians 5. So you see, loving people uniquely is no new concept at all. God has always categorized the way that we love people uniquely, differently from one person to the next, and in one season to another. So, in the spirit of learning this morning a little bit more about you as an individual, and in order to become more aware of even others that we might be called to love in life, I've got a test for you today. Stacey, would you help me out? Stacey's going to play some music in the background that's going to make you absolutely thoughtful and open. And what I would like to do is do this here and now. Hey, welcome to church. We get to do a test together, all right? This is not going to test whether you get into heaven or not, but it will test, you already probably know this, but it will test what type of love you are wired to receive in life. And I'm going to give you 5 or 6 minutes to go ahead and do this. If you're online, there is a link to a website that we'll share very shortly. If you go to the 5lovelanguages.com and go to the quizzes portion, you'll be able to do this online as well. We'll go ahead and provide that link here in just a moment for you. But here, I would love for you to go through. There's a pen in the seat pocket in front of you. You're able to circle the one that's most correct for you. As you read through, it'll give you 2 options for each question. These options are not always going to be the opposite of each other. These options, so it makes it sometimes challenging because They both could be wrong for you, or they both could be right for you. I just encourage you to circle the one that is most right for you. And then afterwards, we're going to find out what your love language is. We've used this resource for years and years, Audrey and I. We've used it in our relationship. It's been valuable to us. We've used it in our couples counseling that we do from time to time with different people, especially pre-marriage counseling. It's important to know how it is that people are wired to love. And so I'll give you a few minutes. I'll stop talking now. guys need another minute? Busy working. It's a really interesting resource. I encourage you to look further into it. Online is a good way to do that. I think there's also a book you can get as well. They do have kids versions and teenage versions too. You might be interested in having your kids do a test. Though I'm very interested, I'll tell you what mine is first. Mine is acts of service, which means Audrey is busy. Luckily for me, that's at the bottom of her list, so I do nothing. Her number one's words of affirmation. Isn't she doing a great job back there? She is. Yeah. She has a couple actually that are pretty high. Hugs mean a lot to her. And unfortunately gifts do as well. Luckily they're not expensive gifts. It doesn't say receiving expensive gifts. It's just gifts. Firstly, who has taken this test before? Several of you. Who's changed today from the last time you took it? Oh, a couple of yours changed and shifted around a little. Yeah, it's interesting. From season to season, we're a complicated species, aren't we? We're not easy at all to understand. Sometimes things change. But I'm curious, and I would love to know you better. So I'd like to know, with a show of hands, who's number one out of the top of all of them are words of affirmation? Perfect. 1, 2, okay. 2 of you. That's tied in, okay, first place. That's all right. That's very interesting to me. It was very similar in this first service too. There was only 1 or 2. This will be interesting. Quality time. Same as the first service. This is so fascinating. I think people who have faith just appreciate time. They know it's a valuable resource, that God has given us the most valuable resource. Receiving gifts. Okay, yeah, look out at these people here. Okay, you know what to do. You know what to do, people. Okay. Next week, shower them in gifts. I love it. Acts of service, number 1. Oh yeah, my mother-in-law, you back there. Okay, yeah, a few of you. Okay, yeah. And then what about physical touch? A hug, a high five, a handshake is nice. A pat on the shoulder. This is wonderful. Unfortunately, we can't give these out to every single person we come across. Say, hey, before we have a conversation, fill this in. I want to know what's going to waste my time and what's not. But we're called to love all people well, aren't we? Love is a gift. Love is not one size fits all. And so I encourage you today to do 2 things. Firstly, I would encourage you to stop and identify the way in which God has been loving you. It's not always easy to see, but know that God's love can sometimes look like discipline. He will give you what you need, and He will love you in the way that your season demands it. And so I encourage you today to stop and think about the way that God is loving you, and then thank Him for loving you so uniquely. And then secondly, I would encourage you to make a renewed effort to love those around you well. And this is not going to give you the answers for them, but at least it'll give you an idea of some different ways that you can try to love people well. And that you would know that if you're trying your best to do something for someone and you're doing these acts of service for them to show them love and they're just not responding very well, maybe it's time to try a different one. Try on words of affirmation, for example, and see if that might help. Maybe throw a gift in and see if that's a good thing for them. Hey, I encourage you today to try out some different methods of loving people, because everyone needs to be loved uniquely. It is not one size fits all. People are complicated but need to be loved well. then they're worth the effort, aren't they? Yeah. So as we break free from this one-size-fits-all model of love, I believe that we would be encouraged and energized in our faith. And I believe that our relationships will be strengthened. And I believe that we will become closer and closer to the image of Christ, because God is love. Amen?